This directly contradicts the teaching of the Old Testament and the New Testament and the doctors of the church. I mentioned Aquinas, and the teachings of countless popes all the way up to the 19th century. So if the Catholic Church can change its mind on fundamental matters of things like the death penalty for murder, for example, which is clearly stated in the Torah, mandated as it is in Islam, what's next? I mean, and there are many other examples one can give.
Well, I asked him a question about, like pedophilia and other stuff.
Again, that doesn't inch me all the way to Islam. That just inches me a little bit further away from agreeing with the current church.
We are not talking about Islam right now. But I asked you said Christian countries, they don't allow that, right? You said that. I told you to name one Christian country, and he said Vatican, for example. Right?
I use that as an example.
Yeah, but it should be a good example, right?
What is ideally implemented in terms of education.
But we just established that the Pope, which is represented by the Vatican, or he is represented by the Vatican, is changing, changing everything.
Changing God's law, actually,
exactly.
Because it's literally God's law in the scriptures. It's God's law in the Quran, which is clear, but the church feels it's able to change God's law because it doesn't agree with it anymore.
But that's not a contradiction of Catholicism, because we believe in binding emotion.
No, but it contradicts God's law, though. That's much more serious than that. Because by what right does the church have to abrogate God's laws? By what right?
Because the Pope is considered the representative of Christ.
Okay, remind me where the right comes from, where the church feels it can overturn God's law. Well, it can abolish it. The death penalty, for example, in the Bible. It's very clear.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying I can't delve too much into this conversation, because I need to go and look into it.
Because I think Muslims would say that this is what, unfortunately, many people in the book have done, is that they give divine rights, if you like, to their monks and their rabbis by allowing them to change God's teaching, and they don't have that right.
Like the right of Muhammad to marry Aisha when she was 6.
No.
Her father coming and
marriage is not to do with it.
Asking him not to.
No, we're talking here about
no, it's God's will.
That marriage doesn't contradict any biblical law that I'm aware of.
Speaking on behalf of God's
okay,
will.
well, where does Prophet's marriage to Aisha contradict any biblical law? Can you mention a biblical law? Because it matters. If there's a biblical law that contradicts the Prophet's practice, I'd be worried. But I've read the Bible, literally every word from cover to cover. I've never come across any law that would be applicable to the Prophet's marriage to Aisha, ever. But I have come across many teachings of the church that contradict God's laws in the Bible. That's the problem.
So what you are believing, right? You don't have the foundation what you are believing. So you believe that wrong. Prophet Muhammad was an example prophet. But what he did was wrong, marrying a child, right? But at the same time, we are asking...
If it's at a base level, if it's in contradiction with the church's teaching, then yeah.
The church's teaching that sometimes is not rooted in God's laws, that changes its mind and contradicts God's teaching on numerous matters. Is this a reliable source of authority by which we say, oh, well, it contradicts church's teaching?
This is an example that you've given that I actually need to look and go into, not just suck in whatever you're telling me.
Okay.
So you believe in church
like I believe that conversion is a lifelong thing. You convert to God throughout your life. You draw close to God throughout your life. If you tell me something which is in contradiction, I need to go off and spend a decent amount of time on it, enough to actually value its importance.
Can I give you another example? One of the most serious sins in Catholicism, which is not a sin anymore, by the way, is the practice of usury. Usury, charging interest on loans, for example. And this is a very serious crime. Thomas Aquinas said it was a punishable crime. Why? It's outlawed in the Bible, of course. Today, the church is very happy, has no problem with usury at all. It's completely halal, completely accepted. This ruling has been abolished.
Something that I don't agree with.
So that's another example. These are not trivial.
To see the extent at which it's a contradiction, or it's very much a thin line distinction.
But you said
because there are a lot of things which that I've noticed with the church where it said something which is in contradiction, and then I've gone and looked at it and read into the wording.
So why you
and
are
seeing
following?
actually it's not a contradiction, it's just a very thin line, a very thin
But
distinction.
the thing about the death penalty is very black and white. The usury thing is pretty black and white, I would argue. The thing about democracy, which was condemned by
it's very
Pope Pius
black and
XII,
white what we understand.
you know this because you read these encyclical, I'm sure. Very clear. These are completely unacceptable. Catholics cannot support democracy, liberalism, socialism, a whole list of things. Now the Church advocates most of these things every day.
Well, my point being, does it advocate it on a surface, or is that actually part of the church?
Since Vatican II, I think it's part of Vatican, the Church's worldview in a very deep way. Yeah, I think it's been quite secularized. It's adopted the whole Western.
Look at the extent at which Vatican II is actually binding and what within it is binding.
Oh, it's binding.
Because I'm very new. I'm very new to this, so I actually need to dive into that.
I'm not so concerned if it's binding or not. I'm
That's the
concerned the Church
biggest
has changed its teaching. Whether or not it's technically binding, I'm not really concerned about that.
The thing is, Garabandal happened right during when Vatican II was happening, so I do know that there's something going on. If Mary wanted to appear into a village of children in Spain, in rural Spain, for months or years, during the time when this council was happening, that means that it's a very distinctive and controversial and very important council that I need to actually spend a decent amount of time looking at, and I haven't actually spent enough time to actually look at it.
But why you are
I need to
opposing
go
the
off and do a
idea?
lot more reading.
Can I give you another example of a change that is actually happening now? The Pope, I can't remember the guy's name, he's just appointed an old mate of his to be the new head of what used to be the Holy Office.
Are you talking about the current?
Yeah, the one he's Argentinian, I think. And he's actually stated on record, this is the new head of Catholic doctrine and orthodoxy in the church. He's yet to actually take up the post. He's been appointed, I think in August, September. Anyway, he has stated recently that he approves of the blessing of gay unions. I kid you not. So he stated, by the way, on record, in an interview which I've read, this new head of Catholic doctrine, that he supports the blessing of gay relationships, gay unions. Not gay marriage, he's very particular, but gay unions. So if a gay couple was to go to church and say to the priest or the bishop, can you bless? Yes, according to your new head of doctrine.
Yeah,
Now,
it's very stressful what's happening right now. The more I look at it,
okay, I won't give any more examples. I won't give any more examples.
I watch a lot of YouTube about this specifically, and
It is stressful.
But there is a problem.
This is a changing of design. The reason I mention this is not
there are people who
because
have
it's
hobbies where they look in to see what
I know.
different heresies are happening.
But you said you.
But this is the head of the
Church
Catholic
of
Church. My point is this: that here we have doctrine changing in front of our eyes, because in the Catechism it still says that homosexuality is intrinsically disordered, and it's a very so serious, actually a mortal sin. Now we have the new head of the church saying, well, yeah, priests can bless relationships, and I'm thinking, are you even a Catholic? But apparently he is. Pope says he is. Yeah. So this is doctrine changing, along with about the death penalty, along with usury, along with the church teaching on democracy. There are a long list of fundamental political, moral principles that have changed by the church within a few hundred years. So I would say you can't rely on it as a guidance for God's truth.
Why you are following those laws? You said I follow.
Prophet
Muhammad married a child.
I want to say, and I want to contradict this.
Goes against.
Hey, there you go.
To say something very similar.
It's very similar.
You looked into
Not mine.
private revelation.
Oh yeah, there you go. So you're sponsored now.
So you did look into private revelation, right? Did you look into Garabandal?
Private revelation is not the teaching of the church.
I know.
That's all the Catholics should be concerned about.
But
What matters is teaching. We don't rush to private revelation. Oh, Mary spoke to me this morning and over breakfast, and that's my private revelation. Catholics should look to the official teaching of the church for guidance, not for private revelation.
The Pope has said the private revelation is important, and that he doesn't believe that Our Lady, that Mary would be appearing like a postal lady to some women in the Balkans, constantly.
And you think she should appear as a post woman?
I think if we're in a serious enough circumstance, because what you're talking about is very serious for the church. It is happening.
Some say that the church is apostatized.
If you look at Garabandal, if you look at the ones behind it, we are very, very, very close to the one. And I mean, in the next year, close to the one.
But what would it take for you to think that this is just unacceptable? I mean, for church to bless gay weddings, or at what point
I don't think that's acceptable at all.
No, I know you don't. But at what point does it cross the line and you say no more?
Would you leave that?
Well, I trust when Christ says that the gates of hell will not prevail against the church.
Which church?
The Catholic Church.
Oh, really? Does it say the Catholic Church? Does it? Does it say the Catholic Church? Does it? In that passage in Matthew?
With Peter's church.
And you think the Peter's Church is the Roman Catholic Church today? That's a big argument. I'm not convinced that Peter would recognise today's church at all. Peter was practicing.
You might say that was my church.
Peter was a Jew who upheld the law, the Torah. He wasn't a Gentile guy.
So why are you following those laws? We just established that it's keep changing, right? Why you are still following those laws? You said you want to go back and study. That's fine. But in logic, if you found that the truth,
My name is Tony
I
Blair.
don't have any money, sorry.
Don't you think it's Paul's belief?
My name is Tony Blair.
But that's God's teachings, right? God's laws. Why they keep changing it? What is the reason?
Father Chad Rippinger I was listening to talk about this recently. We were saying that you literally have to be a biblical scholar to avoid like all the heresies that are going on right now. Like you have to. It's like a full-time job trying to make sure not to tread into heresy right now.
Do you think
because
the church that you believe Christ founded had the power to change God's laws willy-nilly? Do you think that was part of the?
Power to bind and loose, and there's
Yeah,
an implication.
but that's not what to change God's laws, to make what was haram
Because
halal.
God is unchanging. So
Right.
by definition, his laws would be changing.
But-
But how his laws apply to people might
Right.
change.
But can the laws themselves, the principles are usury, the principles of
Yeah, I believe that usury-
capital punishment, can all these be changed?
If that's infallible dogma of the church, the usury.
No, I'm not concerned if it's infallible or not. It's the teaching of the church. This is
there's a distinction
very
that's
niche.
made between laws.
I know. That's why I'm not. This is a trap in a way because there's a very niche thing about what is and isn't
That's what
infallible.
I'm saying is
I'm just
we're
talking the
looking at
actual
that.
teaching of the church, whether or not it's infallible by your definition. Do you think that the church has the authority to change God's laws?
Change God's law.
Yeah, to make what was haram halal, basically.
I believe that
Because I don't think that we have that authority. Why? Because God has not
I
authorized
don't
it.
believe that we have a
Well, as Muslims, we don't believe that.
We don't believe in it.
We don't believe that we as humans can overrule God's laws. We have no authority to do that. But you believe you do.
I believe complicated discussion.
I don't think it's complicated.
I don't think it's complicated. It's very easy, to establish that
From an
it keeps
outside
changing.
view, yes, but from a Catholic understanding, it is complicated.
I think that's a smoke screen for facing the realities of the church changing its teaching on really important matters, on a whole range of really serious sins, things which were serious crimes, like usury, which is still completely prohibited in Islam, of course, and in the Bible, but in Christianity now, it's perfectly fine. Where did that happen? It happened in the last 400 years.
Well, I'm looking for the objective truth, and even if that's very refined and detailed, it's still the truth. It's not supposed to be a blanket symbol, because God isn't.
But that's part of the truth, which is a fact. It has changed. Keep changing. I'll give an example. Today, pedophilia is wrong.
You
right?
have to look at
what if
all
in
the details
20
of the
years
facts
the church came and said, "No, that's fine," and this is not
but
against the Bible.
that's still a blanket statement, saying it was this way and now it's this way. That's not looking at the details, and I need to go look at the details to make sure that's true. And then I can come back to you and be
Okay,
like, yeah,
that's fine. But I have looked at the death penalty because I have looked at the details. It's not difficult. The Bible has lots of statements where the death penalty is required for, say, murder. There are plenty of senior doctors of the church, great theologians who support it, and numerous popes. Today, it's haram. You can't implement it, basically. That for me is not complexity. This is a complete 100% change in the teaching of the church. And there are many examples of really important issues like that. And I'm saying the church doesn't have that authority. The Quran criticizes Christians for precisely this point, actually. This is the Quran's argument.
Christians can criticize pagans for this. And we can say Christianity is simple. We can make the same argument that Muslims make to Christians to a less conservative group by saying we have these simple laws we have to follow. Canon law is simple. That doesn't mean that at a deeper level it's still simple. There's still deeper levels to Islam than just the surface level. Like there's still heresies and arguments that happen inside of Islam.
Yeah, just in Islam, we don't believe that human beings have the right to overturn
Like a
God's
Jewish
laws.
person could say that there's
That's it.
contradictions in Islam.
For example, the Bible prohibits the eating of pork, very clearly. Christians believe they can eat pork today. A complete change in
Exactly.
teaching.
That's
Another example.
question
There's
I
so many
asked
examples I
the
can give you.
woman.
There are literally dozens and dozens of really serious examples where Catholics feel that they can overturn the teaching of God because of canon law or some pope.
Is that law a law for God or is that law a law for man?
The law is in the Torah. It's from God. It's in the Torah.
From God,
The
but
Torah
is
is
but
from God.
Is it for God or is it for man?
What do you mean for God or for man? It's for.
I mean, it's like the argument of when Jesus was preaching on the Sabbath, saying the Sabbath was made for man, not man made for the Sabbath.
No, but that wasn't quoting a
because
law.
God's law isn't made to restrict God.
Yeah,
It's
I'm
made
talking
to
about
restrict
very
man.
clear prohibitions in the Bible about eating of pork, and yet Christians overwhelmingly today think it's perfectly fine to eat pork. That is, they've abrogated God's teaching. Islam as well, of course, has maintained the teaching of God.
Exactly.
And this is again an example. In all of these examples, by the way, and in every single case, Islam has preserved the teachings of God. Christians have abandoned every single example we've been through. Whether it be democracy, usury, homosexuality.
I have big problems with this in that regard specific because if the Torah has been corrupted and the Gospel has been corrupted and the Psalms have been corrupted, why would the Quran not be corrupted? Is that not a really
That's a
bad
different
track
subject.
record?
God has promised, the Quran actually answers this. It says that when God gave these particular revelations to the Jews and so on, it was responsibility of the rabbis and the scribes to look after it. They failed to do that. God has promised in the Quran that He will preserve and maintain the final revelation to all of mankind intact. It's God has promised that He will preserve it. And the funny thing is, not the funny thing, the fact is, He has done that because the Quran we have today is identical to the Quran. We now know this. We have manuscripts going back to the 7th
Would you say
century.
that the imams
There's an
are currently preserving the teachings
So
of the Quran?
unlike the Bible, which has been, the original message has been partially forgotten, that's the Quran, it's been partially corrupted, God has preserved His final revelation. Why? Because it's a final revelation to
How do you know
mankind.
that specifically has been preserved?
Well, we have the manuscript evidence, if that's what you wish.
Do you think that the teachings of the Quran from the imams...
Let me answer. In the Birmingham, we have a Birmingham Quran in the University of Birmingham. I actually spoke to Professor Thomas, who was the head of the department on that, and he's not a Muslim, has said the Quran we have today is the same, it's identical to the Quran in the University of Birmingham, dated to the time of the Prophet himself.
That's an external verification.
That's a scientific verification.
Yep.
Now, there is no verification. What's the oldest Torah we have in manuscript
I think
form?
200 years after Jesus, I think. I'm not sure.
If Moses existed about...
Yeah, Moses, sorry.
Yeah, it's literally many, many centuries after the time of the people they purport to say, when it was transmitted orally, probably.
Even the Bible.
How does
So-
that compare to the other texts that are written from that time? How well is the Torah preserved in comparison to...
Well, we see, we don't know if it has been preserved. That's the problem. Because we don't have any original...
Preserved in the current manuscripts that they have.
But we don't have any
We compare
originals.
that to manuscripts of other documents from the same period of time.
Well, other Jewish documents.
Other Jewish documents or other documents in general.
The problem is, the point is the gap in time from
Because that
Moses'
says
time. So when did Moses live, roughly? Do you think about 2000 BC-ish, or should we just say 2000 for the sake of argument? The earliest Torah we have, fragments, not the complete one, is the Dead Sea Scrolls. So we got parts of Isaiah and so on. This is about 200 BC. We have a massive,
1,800
well
years.
over 1,000 years gap between the original Torah given to Moses and the text we have now. We have no way of confirming or denying at all that it's been preserved reliably or trustworthy. We have no means of knowing that. But we do have a means of testing that the Quran has, and we now have actual physical proof.
Because you have other texts.
So I can't answer your question. We have no way of knowing if it's reliable or not. The Quran says, by the way, that Jews are partially forgotten and they've altered
That's the
them.
biggest thing which has drawn me to Islam is that.
I think I think that man, I don't want to name
not sure.
his name, but he's a heckler. He's an Islamophobe, right?
I'm joking.
And I came to
I'm
talk
joking.
to you because you're not.
I like the brotherhood which is associated with Islam, and that's one of the biggest things is pulling Lawrence towards Islam.
Who's that?
Lawrence,
Who's Lawrence?
the Taiwanese guy that I hang out with.
Okay, I don't think I know him.
So yeah,
But he comes from a Unitarian background, so he's
Okay.
already a lot closer.
He's
So
already
from
a-
like a Unitarian Baptist. He's
That's
already
a bit of a
quite
contradiction in
conservative.
terms, isn't it? But anyway,
Yeah.
So
yeah.
why-
I don't really understand it, but
he's on the right path, clearly.
So why do you believe that Jesus?
I mean, yeah, he's been coming to church, so,
Oh, your church?
like London Oratory.
Oh, the oratory. Oh, okay. Well,
So,
He's on the right path.
so I have a question.
I meant his Unitarianism. I meant that was.
Well, he's becoming less Unitarian.
So why do you believe Jesus is God?
I literally throw everything that I have to inform me.
Why do you believe Jesus is God?
Why do
I mean,
believe
do you have
Jesus
a scripture saying that Jesus is God? Do you have a conclusion that, you know, do you follow, just said you don't agree with church's law, right? So, in the Bible itself, I'm pretty sure there is 2 or 3 verses that say that Jesus, he never said that I'm God. One of the
That's-
verses said,
we do disagree
I'm going to
because
my
I
God and
believe-
your God. And one of the verses I don't remember.
Yeah, it's in John's Gospel.
Yeah. So why do you still believe in that? Like maybe this is fundamental.
Because I
between
do
Muslims.
believe that he did say that I am God, and that's why.
Where was that?
That's why the
Where?
Where did he say that?
in Mark, and then that's why the Pharisees proceeded to tear his garments and call
Okay,
him blasphemous.
so where did he say he was
I
God?
haven't
You said that he said he was God. Where does he say that? In Mark, you say. I've read all of Mark lots of times. I've never come across a verse where he says he's God.
Let me look at my special Vulgate.
It's special.
Fine.
I like that. Very good, very good.
Very good. Yeah. Go back to what you believe.
A special Catholic translation, hint, hint.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the Greek, shall we? Shall we go back to the Greek?